The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as 10-year-old Prince George walked quietly beside his father, Prince William. The young prince had always been fascinated by the ancient walls and towering gates that surrounded his family's historic home. Today was different, though. Today, he would witness something that would change his understanding of duty, respect, and the weight of tradition forever. Guard Captain Thomas Mitchell had served the royal family for over 25 years. His uniform was always pristine, his posture perfect, and his dedication unwavering. At 53, he had seen 3 generations of royals pass through these gates, each carrying their own burdens and responsibilities. Captain Mitchell took pride in his work, knowing that he was part of something much larger than himself. The Royal Guard wasn't just a job to him. It was a calling, a sacred trust passed down through generations of men and women who had sworn to protect the crown. Prince George had noticed Captain Mitchell many times before. The guard always stood at attention near the main entrance, his eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. The young prince was curious about the man who never seemed to move, never seemed to tire, and always maintained that same respectful expression. William had taught his son to observe people carefully, to understand that everyone had a story worth knowing. On this particular morning, Prince George stopped walking and tugged gently at his father's sleeve. "Father, may I speak with Captain Mitchell?" he asked quietly. William looked down at his son with surprise. It wasn't unusual for George to be curious about the staff, but there was something different in his tone today, something more serious, more thoughtful than usual. "Of course, George. But remember to be respectful," William replied, though he knew his son had always been naturally courteous to everyone around him. Prince George approached Captain Mitchell slowly, his small hands clasped behind his back in a gesture that mirrored the formal posture he had been taught since childhood. The guard remained at attention, his eyes focused straight ahead as protocol demanded. But there was something in the air that morning, a sense of anticipation that even the experienced captain couldn't ignore. "Captain Mitchell," Prince George said softly, his voice carrying the kind of sincerity that only children possess. "I wanted to thank you for everything you do for our family." The guard's eyes flickered slightly, though his posture remained unchanged. In all his years of service, he had rarely been addressed directly by members of the royal family, especially not by someone so young. Protocol dictated that he should acknowledge the prince's words with a simple nod, nothing more. But Prince George wasn't finished. He had been thinking about this moment for weeks, watching Captain Mitchell day after day, wondering about the man behind the uniform. The young prince had learned from his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, that true leadership meant recognizing the contributions of others, no matter how small or seemingly invisible those contributions might appear. "I know you stand here every day, watching over us," George continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I know you miss time with your own family because you're here protecting mine. I see you in the rain, in the cold, always doing your duty. I wanted you to know that I notice, and I'm grateful." Captain Mitchell felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't the kind of formal acknowledgement he occasionally received from adult royals. This was genuine appreciation from a child who had no obligation to notice him at all. The guard had been having doubts lately about his role, wondering if his years of service truly mattered in the grand scheme of things. His own children had grown up while he stood guard at various royal residences, and there were times when he questioned whether his sacrifice had been worthwhile. Prince George reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "I wrote something for you," he said, extending the paper toward the guard. "You don't have to read it now, but I wanted you to have it." Captain Mitchell's training told him to maintain his position, to follow protocol, to remain impassive. But something about the sincerity in the young prince's eyes made him pause. Very slowly, very carefully, he moved his hand to accept the folded paper. His fingers brushed against the prince's small hand for just a moment, and in that brief contact, something profound passed between them. "Thank you, Your Royal Highness," Captain Mitchell said quietly, his voice carrying decades of emotion. "Your words mean more than you know." Prince George smiled, not the formal smile he had been taught for public appearances, but a genuine, warm expression that transformed his young face. "May I ask you something, Captain Mitchell?" The guard nodded, curious about what this remarkable young boy might want to know. Do you have children of your own? The question hit Captain Mitchell like a gentle but powerful wave. Yes, sir. I have 2 children, a daughter who's 17 and a son who's 15. Do they know how proud they should be of their father? Prince George asked with the kind of directness that only children can manage without seeming presumptuous. For a moment, Captain Mitchell struggled to maintain his composure. His daughter Sarah had indeed expressed pride in his work, but his son James had often complained about his father's absence during important moments in his life. The guard had missed school plays, football matches, and family dinners, all in service to the crown. There had been times when he wondered if his children understood the importance of his duty. I hope they do, sir, Captain Mitchell replied honestly. Sometimes it's difficult for them to understand why my work requires so much time away from home. Prince George nodded thoughtfully, as if processing this information with the seriousness of someone much older. My father explained to me once that protecting something important means making sacrifices. He said that the people who make those sacrifices are heroes, even if the world doesn't always recognize them as such. These words from a 10-year-old boy struck Captain Mitchell with unexpected force. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just a man doing his job to the best of his ability. But hearing this perspective from someone who would one day wear the crown gave his service a new meaning, a deeper significance that he had never fully appreciated before. Prince William, who had been watching this exchange from a respectful distance, felt a surge of pride in his son. The boy was demonstrating the kind of emotional intelligence and genuine care for others that would serve him well in his future role. This wasn't something that could be taught in formal lessons about royal protocol. This was wisdom that came from the heart, from truly understanding that leadership meant recognizing the humanity in everyone around him. Captain Mitchell, Prince George said, taking another step closer. Would it be appropriate for me to meet your children someday? I think they should know that their father is one of the most important people in my life, even though we don't talk very often. The guard felt tears threatening to form in his eyes, though his training helped him maintain control. In 30 years of service, no one had ever asked to meet his family. No one had ever suggested that his personal life mattered to the people he protected. This young prince was showing him a level of respect and consideration that touched something deep in his soul. That would be an extraordinary honor, Your Royal Highness, Captain Mitchell replied, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. They would treasure such a meeting for the rest of their lives. Prince George smiled again, that same genuine expression that seemed to light up everything around him. Then, we'll arrange it. Father says that the people who serve our family with dedication deserve to know how much they mean to us. As the conversation continued, other guards and staff members began to notice what was happening. Word spread quietly through the castle that Prince George was having an extended conversation with Captain Mitchell, and people began to pause in their duties to observe this unusual scene. It wasn't every day that a member of the royal family spent so much time acknowledging the service of a single guard. Lady Catherine Pemberton, one of the senior household staff, watched from a window overlooking the courtyard. She had worked at various royal residences for over 15 years and had rarely seen such a display of personal connection between a royal family member and a staff member. Most interactions were polite but brief, maintaining the necessary distance that protocol demanded. But there was something different about Prince George's approach, something that suggested he understood instinctively that genuine leadership required genuine human connection. Your Royal Highness, Captain Mitchell said carefully, might I ask what inspired you to write me a letter? Prince George looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. My great-grandmother used to tell me stories about the people who worked for our family. She said that behind every uniform was a person with dreams, fears, and families of their own. She taught me that a good king doesn't just rule over people. He serves them by recognizing their worth and their sacrifices. These words, spoken with the innocent wisdom of childhood, carried a weight that Captain Mitchell would remember for the rest of his life. The boy was already demonstrating the kind of leadership that his great-grandmother had embodied for over 70 years on the throne. It wasn't about power or privilege. It was about understanding that true authority came from serving others and recognizing their contributions. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman, Captain Mitchell said softly. She was, Prince George replied with genuine affection in his voice. She taught me that the crown isn't just something you wear. It's a responsibility to care for everyone in your kingdom, from the most important ministers to the guards who stand at the gates." As their conversation continued, Prince George asked Captain Mitchell about his military background, his family, and his thoughts about the changes he had witnessed during his decades of service. The guard found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories about his early days in the army, his decision to join the Royal Protection Service, and his hopes for his children's futures. The young prince listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that seemed far beyond his years. There was no sense of condescension or formality in their exchange, just two human beings connecting across the boundaries of age, rank, and circumstance. As the morning progressed, other staff members began to gather at a respectful distance, drawn by the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. Gardeners paused in their work, housekeepers found reasons to step outside, and other guards glanced over whenever their duties allowed. Everyone could sense that something special was happening, something that would be remembered and talked about for years to come. Prince George seemed completely unaware of the attention he was drawing. His focus remained entirely on Captain Mitchell, as if the guard were the most important person in the world at that moment. This level of genuine attention and interest was something the captain had never experienced from a member of the royal family, and it touched him in ways he was still trying to understand. The folded piece of paper in his pocket felt warm against his chest, and he found himself wondering what the young prince had written. Whatever it was, he knew it would become one of his most treasured possessions, a reminder of the day when a future king took the time to see him not just as a guard, but as a human being worthy of respect and appreciation. Later that evening, Captain Mitchell sat in the small break room reserved for senior guards, the folded piece of paper still in his pocket. His shift had ended an hour ago, but he found himself reluctant to leave the castle. The conversation with Prince George had left him feeling different somehow, more valued, more seen than he had felt in years of faithful service. Fellow guards noticed the change in their captain immediately. Sergeant David Crawford, who had worked alongside Mitchell for 12 years, approached him with curiosity. "You seem different tonight, Tom. Something happened during your shift." Captain Mitchell looked up at his colleague, a man who had become like a brother to him over the years of shared duty. Crawford was one of the few people who knew about the personal struggles Mitchell faced, the difficulty of balancing his dedication to royal service with his responsibilities as a father and husband. "Prince George spoke with me today," Mitchell said simply, though his voice carried an undercurrent of amazement. "Really spoke with me. For nearly an hour." Crawford's eyebrows rose in surprise. In all his years of service, he had rarely heard of such extended personal interaction between a royal family member and a guard. Brief acknowledgments, polite nods, occasional expressions of thanks during special occasions. These were the normal extent of personal contact. "What did you talk about?" Crawford asked, settling into a chair across from his captain. Mitchell pulled the folded paper from his pocket, handling it with the care one might show to a precious document. "He thanked me for my service. Asked about my family. Wanted to know if I was proud of my work." He paused, his voice becoming softer. "And he gave me this." Crawford watched as his captain carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting was clearly that of a child, neat but with the careful precision of someone still learning proper penmanship. As Mitchell read the words silently, Crawford could see emotions playing across his colleague's face: surprise, gratitude, and something that looked very much like joy. "Would you like to share it?" Crawford asked gently. Mitchell nodded, clearing his throat before reading aloud. "Dear Captain Mitchell, I wanted you to know that I watch you every day, and I think you are one of the bravest people I know. My father told me that being brave isn't just about fighting battles. It's about doing your duty even when it's difficult, even when people don't notice. You do that every day. I know you have a family of your own, and I know they must miss you when you're here protecting mine. That makes your service even more special because it means you're choosing to help us even when it's hard for you. I hope your children know how lucky they are to have such a dedicated father. When I become king someday, I want to remember what you've taught me about quiet strength and faithful service. Thank you for being my example of what a true guardian looks like. With great respect and gratitude, Prince George." The break room fell completely silent. Crawford stared at his captain, then at the letter, hardly believing what he had just heard. In 20 years of royal service, he had never encountered anything like this, such personal, heartfelt recognition from a member of the royal family, especially from someone so young. "Tom," Crawford said quietly, "that's extraordinary. I've never heard of anything like this happening before." Mitchell carefully refolded the letter, his hands trembling slightly. "David, I've been questioning my choices lately, wondering if all the missed dinners, the school events I couldn't attend, the family time I've sacrificed, wondering if it was worth it. This letter, this conversation, it's reminded me why I chose this path." Other guards began filtering into the break room as news of the unusual interaction spread. Each man and woman who served in the Royal Protection Unit understood the personal costs of their chosen profession. They all made similar sacrifices, all struggled with the balance between duty and family, all wondered sometimes if their service truly mattered to the people they protected. Guard Sarah Thompson, one of the newer members of the team, listened to Captain Mitchell's account with growing amazement. She had joined the Royal Protection Service only 6 months earlier, drawn by the honor and tradition associated with the role. But the reality of the work, the long hours, the rigid protocols, the emotional distance required, had been more challenging than she had anticipated. "Captain Mitchell," Thompson said hesitantly, "may I ask you something?" Mitchell nodded encouragingly. He had always made time for the younger guards, understanding that their success reflected on the entire team. "How do you maintain your dedication when the work feels invisible sometimes? When you stand for hours, and it seems like no one notices or cares?" Mitchell smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. "Sarah, before today, I might have given you a different answer. I would have talked about duty, about tradition, about the importance of the institution we serve. Those things are still true, but now I understand something else." He held up the letter from Prince George. "Service isn't about being noticed or thanked. It's about doing what's right because it's right. But when someone does notice, when they take the time to acknowledge what you do, it transforms everything. Prince George didn't have to speak with me today. He could have walked past like every other day. But he chose to see me as a person, not just a uniform." Sergeant Crawford leaned forward, intrigued by this new perspective from his captain. "What do you think prompted him to do it?" "That's what amazes me most," Mitchell replied. "It wasn't prompted by anything special I did. It was just kindness, recognition of shared humanity. That young boy understood something that many adults never learn, that acknowledging other people's contributions, especially the quiet ones, has incredible power." The conversation in the break room continued late into the evening as guards shared their own experiences with the royal family, their motivations for choosing this profession, and their thoughts about the meaning of service. Captain Mitchell found himself in the role of informal counselor, helping his colleagues process their own relationships with their work and their sense of purpose. Meanwhile, in another part of Windsor Castle, Prince George was having his own conversation about the day's events. He sat with his father in the private study that Prince William used for official business, the same room where important decisions about royal duties and family matters were often discussed. "George," William said, settling into the chair across from his son, "I was impressed by your conversation with Captain Mitchell today. What made you decide to approach him?" Prince George considered the question carefully, a habit he had developed from years of being asked to explain his thoughts and actions. "I've been watching him for months, Father. Every morning, every evening, he's there. Rain or shine, hot or cold. He never complains, never looks bored or angry. Just present." William nodded, encouraging his son to continue. "I started wondering about his life outside the castle. Does he have hobbies? Does he laugh with his friends? What does he think about when he's standing there for hours?" Prince George paused, his young face serious. "And then I realized something. I was curious about him as a person, but I had never actually tried to find out. I was treating him like part of the furniture instead of like a human being." These words struck William profoundly. His 10-year-old son had articulated something that many adults struggled to understand: the difference between acknowledging someone's function and recognizing their humanity. "What did you learn from talking with him?" William asked. "He's more interesting than I expected," George replied with a smile. "He used to be in the army before he came here. He has 2 children who are close to my age. He loves history and reads books about medieval warfare in his spare time. He's been to 15 different countries during his military service. And he really cares about doing his job well. William felt a surge of pride in his son's curiosity and empathy. These were not qualities that could be taught through formal lessons or royal protocol training. They came from something deeper, a genuine interest in other people and an instinctive understanding that everyone had value regardless of their position in life. George, do you understand why your conversation with Captain Mitchell was so significant? The young prince thought for a moment. I think so. People in his position probably don't get acknowledged very often for the personal sacrifices they make. They're expected to do their duty quietly, without expecting recognition. But everyone needs to feel like their contributions matter, don't they? Exactly, William confirmed. And, as future king, understanding that principle will be one of your most important responsibilities. A crown doesn't make someone special. What makes a leader special is how they treat the people around them, especially those who have less power. Prince George nodded seriously. Great-grandmother taught me that the crown is heavy not because of the jewels, but because of the responsibility to care for everyone in the kingdom. She said a good monarch is a servant, not a master. These words, spoken with the clarity that children often brought to complex concepts, reminded William of his own lessons about leadership and responsibility. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had indeed emphasized service above all else throughout her long reign. She had understood that true authority came from earning respect through actions, not demanding it through position. What will you do with what you learned today? William asked. I want to meet Captain Mitchell's children. George replied immediately. I want them to know that their father is important to our family. And I want to learn more about the other people who work here. Mrs. Henderson in the kitchen, Mr. Roberts who maintains the gardens, the drivers, the housekeepers. They all have stories, don't they? William smiled, recognizing that his son was developing the kind of perspective that would serve him well in his future role. They do indeed. And I think your great-grandmother would be very proud of you for understanding that. As the evening progressed, word of Prince George's interaction with Captain Mitchell continued to spread throughout the castle staff. The story was told and retold, each person adding their own perspective and interpretation to what had happened. Mrs. Helen Morrison, the head housekeeper who had worked at royal residences for over 30 years, heard the account from one of the kitchen staff. Her first reaction was surprise, not because she thought poorly of Prince George, but because such personal engagement between royals and staff was genuinely unusual. It shows real maturity for someone his age, Mrs. Morrison commented to her assistant. Most children, even royal children, are focused on themselves and their immediate interests. To notice the guards, to think about their feelings and their families, that suggests someone who's already thinking like a leader. The story reached every corner of the castle staff by the next morning. Gardeners discussed it while tending to the grounds. Kitchen staff talked about it while preparing meals, and maintenance workers shared their thoughts during their breaks. For many of them, Prince George's gesture represented something larger than a simple act of kindness. It suggested hope for the future of the monarchy. James Patterson, one of the younger gardeners, had been skeptical about the relevance of the royal family in modern times. At 25, he had taken the job primarily for the steady pay and benefits, not out of any particular loyalty to the institution. But hearing about Prince George's conversation with Captain Mitchell made him reconsider his assumptions. Maybe there's something to be said for having leaders who actually see the people around them. Patterson confided to his colleague during their lunch break. Most politicians and wealthy people I've encountered act like service workers are invisible. But this kid, he's 10 years old, and he's already showing more awareness than most adults. This sentiment was echoed throughout the castle staff. People who had become cynical about their work, who had started to feel like interchangeable parts in a vast institutional machine, found themselves reconsidering their roles and their value to the royal household. 3 weeks after the conversation that had changed Captain Mitchell's perspective on his service, Prince George approached his father with a carefully planned proposal. The young prince had been thinking extensively about his interaction with the guard and had developed what he considered an important initiative. Father, I would like to arrange something special for Captain Mitchell and his family, George announced during their weekly private meeting, where they discussed the prince's education, upcoming duties, and personal development. Prince William looked up from the correspondence he had been reviewing, intrigued by the serious tone in his son's voice. What did you have in mind, George? I want to invite Captain Mitchell's children to visit the castle. Not for a formal tour or a photo opportunity, but for a real visit. I want them to see where their father works and understand how important he is to our family. Prince George paused, his expression earnest. And I want to learn about their lives too. What are their interests? What do they want to do when they grow up? What questions do they have about our family or about their father's work? William was struck by the thoughtfulness of his son's proposal. This wasn't the kind of charitable appearance or public relations gesture that royal family members often participated in. This was personal, genuine interest in connecting with the family of someone who served them faithfully. That's a wonderful idea, George. But we'll need to be careful about how we arrange it. Captain Mitchell's children are private citizens, and we need to ensure that any meeting respects their privacy and doesn't create unwanted attention for their family. Prince George nodded seriously. I understand. Captain Mitchell told me his daughter Sarah is interested in history, and his son James plays football. Maybe we could arrange activities around their interests? Sarah could see some of the historical documents in the castle library, and James could meet some of the groundskeepers who maintain the football pitch we use for family games. The level of detail and consideration in his son's planning impressed William greatly. Prince George had clearly been thinking about this meeting for weeks, developing ideas that would make it meaningful for Captain Mitchell's children rather than simply impressive or overwhelming. Let's speak with Captain Mitchell first, William suggested. We need to ensure that he's comfortable with this arrangement and that his children are interested in participating. Later that afternoon, Prince William and Prince George approached Captain Mitchell together at his usual post near the main entrance. The guard's posture straightened even more than usual when he saw both royals approaching, though his expression remained carefully neutral as protocol demanded. Captain Mitchell, Prince William began. Prince George has a proposal that I believe you'll find interesting. Prince George stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in the formal posture he had been taught for important conversations. Captain Mitchell, I've been thinking about our conversation several weeks ago, and I would very much like to meet your children. Would they be interested in visiting the castle for an afternoon? Not for anything formal or public, just to meet each other. Captain Mitchell felt his heart rate increase. In all his years of service, he had never imagined that his personal family might be invited to interact with the royal family in such a direct, personal way. The honor was extraordinary, but more than that, the genuine interest Prince George was showing in his children touched him deeply. Your Royal Highness, that would be my children would be absolutely thrilled, Mitchell replied, his voice thick with emotion. They have always been curious about my work here, about the family I serve. Sarah especially has asked many questions about the history of the castle and the traditions associated with royal service. Prince George's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Perfect. Father, could we arrange for them to visit this weekend? We could show them some of the historical rooms, and maybe James would like to see the stables where we keep the horses for ceremonial occasions. The arrangements for the visit required careful coordination between the royal household staff and security personnel. This wasn't the kind of meeting that followed standard protocols, so new procedures had to be developed to ensure both the comfort of Captain Mitchell's family and the privacy that the royal family required. Mrs. Morrison, the head housekeeper, was brought into the planning process to help coordinate the logistics. Her initial reaction was one of pleasant surprise. In 30 years of working in royal households, I've never seen anything quite like this, she confided to her assistant. Usually, when staff families are invited to royal events, it's for large, formal occasions like Christmas parties or garden parties. This kind of personal, intimate meeting is unprecedented. The level of personal attention Prince George was devoting to the planning impressed everyone involved. He worked with the castle librarian to select historical documents and artifacts that might interest Sarah, and he consulted with the grounds crew to plan a tour of facilities that James might find engaging. When Saturday arrived, Captain Mitchell found himself more nervous than he had been during his most challenging royal protection assignments. He stood with his children outside the private entrance that Prince George had suggested for their arrival, watching as Sarah fidgeted with her dress, and James tried to smooth his hair into perfect order. Remember, Mitchell told his children quietly, be yourselves. Prince George specifically requested that this be informal and comfortable for all of us. Sarah Mitchell, at 17, was tall and thoughtful like her father, with the kind of intellectual curiosity that made her an excellent student. She had been fascinated by history since childhood, and the opportunity to see Windsor Castle's archives and speak with someone who lived surrounded by centuries of royal history was like a dream come true. James Mitchell, 15 and athletic, had been skeptical about the visit until his father explained that Prince George was genuinely interested in getting to know them as individuals. The teenager's initial nervousness had transformed into curiosity about what this young royal was really like away from public appearances and formal ceremonies. Prince George appeared at the entrance precisely on time, accompanied by Prince William and a minimal security detail. The young prince had dressed casually, jeans and a sweater rather than the formal attire his public appearances required, and his demeanor was relaxed and welcoming. "Captain Mitchell," Prince George said with a warm smile, "thank you for bringing your family to meet us. And you must be Sarah and James." The teenager siblings had prepared for this meeting by practicing formal greetings and proper forms of address, but Prince George's casual, friendly approach immediately put them at ease. "It's wonderful to meet you both," Prince George continued. "Your father has told me so many interesting things about you. Sarah, I understand you're passionate about history. And James, I heard you're an excellent football player." Sarah found her voice first. "Your Royal Highness, yes, I love learning about British history, especially the medieval period. The opportunity to see Windsor Castle from the inside is incredible. Please, call me George when we're talking privately like this," the prince replied. "And I'm excited to show you some things that aren't usually available for public tours. We have documents that go back over 800 years, including some letters written by kings and queens during some of the most dramatic periods in English history." James, encouraged by his sister's successful interaction, spoke up. "George, thank you for inviting us. I have to admit, I'm really curious about what it's like to grow up in a place like this." Prince George laughed, a genuine sound that carried no trace of formality or artifice. "It's probably different than you might expect. There are definitely advantages, amazing libraries, incredible art, lots of space to explore. But there are also challenges that most people don't think about. Sometimes I wish I could just walk to the local shop or play football in the park without security planning and media attention." This honest response surprised both teenagers. They had expected formal politeness, not genuine reflection on the complexities of royal life. The tour that followed was unlike anything the Mitchell family had ever experienced. Prince George led them through private rooms that contained centuries of royal history, sharing stories that brought the artifacts and documents to life. His knowledge was impressive, but more important was his ability to make the history relevant and engaging. In the library, Sarah was amazed to handle letters written by Queen Elizabeth I, documents that revealed the personal thoughts and concerns of one of England's most famous monarchs. Prince George explained the historical context of each piece, but he also encouraged Sarah to share her own thoughts and questions about the documents. "What strikes me most about these letters," Sarah said while examining a document from the 1580s, "is how personal they are. When you study history in school, you learn about the big events and decisions, but these letters show the person behind the crown." "Exactly," Prince George responded enthusiastically. "That's something I'm still learning myself. The crown isn't just a symbol or a job. It's something worn by real people with real feelings and concerns. My great-grandmother taught me that understanding the personal side of royal history helps you understand the responsibility that comes with the role." Meanwhile, James was fascinated by the behind-the-scenes operations of the castle. Prince George showed him the security command center, the communications equipment used during royal events, and the detailed planning that went into every public appearance. The teenager had never realized how much work and coordination was required to make royal functions appear effortless and seamless. "It's like running a small city," James observed as they toured the operational areas of the castle. "In many ways, it is," Prince George agreed. "We have our own power systems, security networks, communications equipment, and staff to maintain everything. It takes hundreds of people working together to make everything function properly." As the afternoon progressed, the conversation became increasingly natural and relaxed. Captain Mitchell watched with amazement as his children interacted with Prince George as if they had known each other for years. The young prince's genuine interest in their thoughts and experiences created an atmosphere of mutual respect and curiosity. During tea in one of the castle's private sitting rooms, Prince George turned the conversation toward Captain Mitchell's service and its impact on his family. "James, Sarah," Prince George said seriously, "I want you to know how much your father means to our family. His dedication and professionalism have been constants in my life for as long as I can remember. But I also understand that his service has required sacrifices from all of you." James looked at his father with new appreciation. "We've always been proud of Dad's work, but honestly, we didn't always understand why it was so important to him. Sometimes we were frustrated when he missed family events or couldn't attend school functions because of his duties here." "That's completely understandable," Prince George replied. "And it's important that you know how much those sacrifices are valued and appreciated. Your father's commitment to excellence and his unwavering reliability have helped create the security and stability that allow my family to fulfill our responsibilities to the country." Sarah added, "Meeting you today, seeing this place, understanding the complexity of what happens here, it helps us appreciate Dad's role in a way we never could before." Captain Mitchell felt emotions threatening to overwhelm him as he listened to this conversation. For years, he had struggled to help his children understand why his work required so much time and dedication. Prince George's sincere explanation of the importance of royal service, combined with the respect he was showing to the entire Mitchell family, was providing the context and validation that had been missing from those difficult family discussions. As the visit concluded, Prince George made a request that surprised everyone. "Captain Mitchell, would it be appropriate for me to correspond with Sarah and James occasionally? I've learned so much from talking with them today, and I think it would be valuable for me to maintain friendships with people who live outside the royal world." Captain Mitchell looked to Prince William, who nodded approvingly. "If my children would be interested in such correspondence, it would be an extraordinary honor for our family." Both teenagers expressed enthusiastic interest in staying in touch with Prince George, and plans were made for occasional letters and perhaps future visits. As the Mitchell family prepared to leave, Prince George made one final gesture that would resonate with them for years to come. He presented each family member with a personal gift, not expensive or elaborate items, but thoughtful tokens that reflected their individual interests and the conversations they had shared. For Sarah, he had selected a leather-bound journal with the royal coat of arms, along with a note encouraging her to document her own thoughts about history as she continued her studies. For James, he provided a signed football from the England national team, acquired through royal connections, with an inscription encouraging him to pursue his athletic goals. For Captain Mitchell, Prince George presented a framed photograph of the three of them together during the afternoon's tour, along with a handwritten note expressing gratitude for his years of faithful service and for raising such remarkable children. "Captain Mitchell," Prince George said as they stood at the castle entrance where their relationship had first deepened weeks earlier, "thank you for sharing your family with us today. This afternoon has reminded me of something my great-grandmother often said, that the strength of the monarchy lies not in its power or its wealth, but in its connection to the people it serves." The guard felt the full weight of profound gratitude as he looked at this young boy who would someday be king. Prince George had shown him and his family a level of respect, attention, and genuine care that transcended protocol and tradition. This wasn't about royal duty or public relations. This was about human connection and mutual recognition of shared values. As the Mitchell family drove away from Windsor Castle that evening, they carried with them not just memories of an extraordinary day, but a new understanding of service, leadership, and the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect. Captain Mitchell returned to his duties the following week with renewed purpose and pride, knowing that his sacrifice had been truly seen and valued. Prince George, for his part, had learned lessons about leadership that would shape his approach to royal duty for the rest of his life. He had discovered that genuine connection with people from all walks of life wasn't just personally fulfilling. It was essential preparation for the responsibility he would one day inherit. The story of Prince George's quiet gesture spread throughout the royal household and beyond, becoming an example of the kind of thoughtful, personal leadership that distinguished truly great monarchs. It demonstrated that respect, recognition, and human connection were far more powerful than grand ceremonies or formal pronouncements in building the relationships that sustained the institution of the monarchy. Years later, when historians would study the early development of Prince George's character and leadership style, they would point to this interaction with Captain Mitchell and his family as a defining moment, the day when a 10-year-old boy demonstrated that he understood the most important lesson of royal service, that true authority comes not from demanding respect, but from showing it to others first.